Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at The Ghosts Betwixt, a game I covered back when it was on Kickstarter, a sort of contemporary riff on the dungeon crawler genre. So does this design do more than change up the theme of most crawlers? Let's find out and get to the list. So first, for my number 5, I'm going to start with a pro, and that's focused on the narrative and theme in the game. Although I am going to start with a quick caveat, which is that at least in what I played, which is sort of the first act that was on Kickstarter, it's a very linear narrative journey. There's almost nothing that's going to change in the story if you play it again, so if you're looking for like tons of branching paths, you're not going to find it here. But with that out of the way, first of all, I love that this is a theme we haven't seen in dungeon crawlers before. I'm a fan of horror movies and kind of like surviving the haunted mansion things in general, and this game really like leans into that. It's got unique characters. How many games have a family working together to save one of their family members? Like, totally different than what you would expect. And I think the narrative and the story and the surprises really help to build these characters, build the suspense of the situation without making you read for hours and hours. You'll be out of the reading and into the game pretty quickly. I just think it works really well, and it's a refreshing take on the genre overall. And I also have a pro for my number 4, which are the systems the game has for upgrading and unlocking new stuff for your characters. So like most dungeon crawlers, your characters get new equipment, although it's all themed with sort of the modern spin on things. That's a lot of fun. But then you also have unique abilities for each family member, and they kind of have different skill trees to explore, so you have some nice replay there, and it really opens up the tactical options as you get more stuff. And then on top of that, without spoiling too much, you have some cool unlocks, like if you defeat monsters and do certain things, you can actually add cards of certain decks. Just a lot of cool things to keep you coming back and seeing how much you can boost your characters. But we're going down a bit to a mix for my number 3, which is focused on the scenario variety in the campaign, at least the one act that we have so far. But I'll start by saying that in many ways this point actually leans pro, because pretty much every scenario has at least one really cool, surprising moment. And some of the scenarios really buck the trend of like basically exploring and give you some like wacky objectives to pursue. I love that. There's a lot of creativity here. But the negative side of this that brings it down to a mix for me is that many of the scenarios feel like they still have a decent amount of filler, where you're just kind of walking around going through the motions. Although, you know, maybe this should be a pro thinking more, because even within those, they have unique exploration encounters you can have that vary from scenario to scenario and play to play. I don't know, maybe this is a pro, but I still think some gamers are going to find there being just kind of dull sections in the middle of some scenarios. And that connects in many ways to my number 2, also a mix, which is the core exploration kind of cycle with the game. And on the positive side, I think the way the game handles exploration is really cool. You have these little map tokens, so everything is randomized, and also what you'll encounter is randomized. So if you play the exact same mission again, you might have monsters earlier or things kind of pairing up in weird ways, and it feels very freeform how the map builds out. I like all of that. But the negative side of this, and again it's kind of connected to my number 3, is that for most of the scenarios, I just feel like this takes too long. These scenarios can often take 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I feel like if they maybe shaved off 20 or 30 minutes of that, it would be perfect. And finally, I'm going to end with one more mix, and it's a thing to be spending the most time in the game doing, and that is the combat system. And I'll start with the negative here, because the game kind of does too, and that's the fact that in early missions, you don't have enough tactical options. The enemies aren't really doing enough interesting stuff. There aren't necessarily enough traps and things like terrain pieces to interact with, but the positives of combat definitely start to show up later, and there are a lot of really cool systems here. Like, I love the enemy targeting system, where you have one random family member being focused on by an enemy, but as you hit them or as they hit you, they can switch their focus. Enemy AI is super quick to resolve, and as you get abilities, as you upgrade, as the scenarios become more interesting, combat becomes really fun. You have a lot of tools at your disposal. So I think this is one that for the Act 2 content, which I know the designer plans to do, combat will be a full-on pro, and the game will be a lot of fun the entire time. But here, trying to kind of ease the player in, I just felt like combats got a little bit dull sometimes until I had more options available. So overall, I definitely think dungeon crawler fans should check out the Ghost Betwixt. I think they'll be more forgiving of some of the things that I get annoyed with by crawlers in general. I'm really becoming not so much a fan of the genre. Like, they probably won't find the scenarios as long, and they'll probably enjoy the combat more. And I think thematic gamers overall might want to give it a look. The story is pretty fun, and again, this is a theme I've never seen before, and I really appreciate it existing. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you're looking for a narrative with tons of branching paths. You don't really have that here. If you're looking for a really snappy and streamlined game, you also might want to avoid it because there are tons of tokens, and again, it tends to play a little bit longer than I think it should. And also, for better or worse, it's not a fantasy theme, so if you want orcs and goblins, look elsewhere. And if you want to see this game in action, I didn't do a new playthrough, but Bernd did on his own channel, Meet Me at the Table, so check out the link that just popped up if you'd like to see him giving it a go. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.